I'm Disclosure Dad. Today we're talking about truth. The truth is we're being lied to about everything. We're literally drowning in a sea of lies. So today I'm going to show you how to navigate those lies using a tool that you already have. Like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, who discovered she had the magic slippers with her the entire time. I'm going to show you how to navigate truth from lies of every question that you can think of from now into the distant past using something you already have. No technology needed, using only your own body. I'm also going to show you a map that breaks down the levels of truth so that you can discern the actual truths of anything on a scale of 1 to 1,000. I'm Disclosure Dad. Let's disclose some truth. Imagine you're at sea, sailing at night, somewhere between California and Hawaii. You don't have a compass. You don't have a GPS. There are no stars in the sky. You can't see shore. It's thousands of miles away. And worse, the storm has been spinning you around for days. You are lost. But then, one of the sailors remembers that if you get a bowl of water and put a cork in it with a magnetized needle attached, that it operates as a crude compass. You quickly assemble the parts. You put them in the bowl and you look, hoping that this might lead you home. The first thing you discover is it's not very accurate. It's actually difficult to get a clear direction. But the more you stare at it, the more you begin to realize that it does point approximately north. Your heart begins to leap because you realize that if the compass points approximately north, then you can head approximately west, and you should eventually run into the coast of California, and then you can just follow the coast up to your ultimate destination. The tool I'm going to share with you is much like that old-style compass in the bowl of water. It's not perfect. It makes mistakes, but it does give you a crude tool for discerning truth from lies. While I don't want to oversell the technique, I really don't want to undersell it either. The full implications of this were first discovered by Dr. David R. Hawkins, MD, PhD, back in the 1990s. In fact, this was the subject of his doctoral thesis and later the subject of many books, linked in the description below. In fact, when one of his professors who was reviewing his doctoral thesis first read this, he was so shocked by the implications for himself and humanity that he literally had to take the next 2 weeks off just to deal with that shock. It really is that big of a deal. So what's the big deal? It's called muscle testing in simple terms, coherence verification in more scientific language. But what it really is a way to use your body to test for truth. Originally, this was used by doctors as a kinesiology test to help determine things like allergies or initial diagnoses. The doctor would have the patient hold strawberries or maybe white bread in one hand, usually close to their chest, and ask them to extend their arm. The doctor would then take 2 fingers and press briefly on the arm. If the arm stayed firm, they were more likely fine and didn't have an allergy for it. If the arm showed some noticeable weakness, they were more likely to have an allergy or intolerance to the food. Now, this is not the only test that they ran, but this was a very quick way to help determine initial diagnoses and allergies before additional testing was ordered.
White bread. Let's try white bread. So Steve's going to put that on his stomach. Yeah, and his arm tests weak. So Steve, his body does not like white bread. Let's try cheese. So he's in the cheese. Steve's putting that on his stomach. And his arm tests strong.
Now, don't let the simplicity of this test fool you. There's a lot more going on here to meets the eye. And we start to get a hint at that complexity when we start to test children.
Here we go. We're going to check you out. You ready? Nice digestive points. You drinking enough water, buddy?
Yes.
You're not stressing out on me, are you?
Notice the doctor isn't testing the boy. He's testing his dad. But his dad only has an arm on his son's shoulder. So how is the dad able to provide accurate responses about his son? Hold on to that question. We'll come back to it. So you may be asking, how accurate is muscle testing? Well, Dr. Annie Jensen at Oxford University did a double-blind study under laboratory conditions and proved it to be 60 to 65% accurate. Now, before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, let's take a look at how powerful 60 to 65% accuracy is in the real world. Remember that story about being lost at sea? This time, instead of using a compass, imagine that your only tool is muscle testing. This is a probability chart on your chances of finding the accurate compass direction, but only using muscle testing. The more times you test, the more accurate your results get. One test is 60 to 65%. 11 tests is 70 to 84%. 25 tests is 84 to 93% accurate. Dr. Hawkins asserts that the actual percentage of success individually can be much higher than 65%. Either way, 60 to 65% is more than enough to get you home. And in the real world, eventually the storm would break and you could navigate normally. Remember, this is meant to be just one tool in your toolbox, not your only tool. But sometimes you don't have any other tools or information. And in that case, muscle testing can be a great tool to help you determine the general direction of truth, which is why it is so valuable to learn. Now, hold on. You may be thinking, how did I go from testing food allergies to navigating a ship without a compass? Well, do you remember the dad who helped diagnose his son using muscle testing? Well, this was really the breakthrough of Hawkins' work. He recognized that the answer about the boy's condition was not actually coming from the boy's body. He realized that the body and mind are actually connected to a universal field of consciousness, a sort of infinite database of truth, and that the muscle test can bypass the ego and get and reveal the truth about almost anything. Remember that the muscle test does not test physical strength. It's testing the bioenergetic coherence or incoherence between the question and the body of the patient, which is connected energetically to the universal field of consciousness. Therefore, when a true or truthful statement is spoken, the muscle stays strong. When a false statement is spoken, it creates a momentary mismatch and the muscle goes noticeably weaker. The answers do not come from the body. Therefore, you can ask just about any question you can think of from now into the distant past with about 60 to 65% accuracy. Unfortunately, you cannot ask about the future because the future is not currently true or false. But you can ask questions about just about anything else: books, movies, music, history, political figures, and much more.
Pull out your arm. When I press down, keep your mind blank. Don't pay attention.
Wait,
Now I'm holding someone in mind. I'm holding someone in mind. And I want you to resist. Resist. You're very strong.
okay, so who did you have? I just want to know.
George Washington.
Oh, okay, yeah, tell me.
Yeah. Now I'm going to hold somebody else in mind. Okay? I'm holding somebody else in mind. Now resist. She goes instantly weak. That was Saddam Hussein.
In this video, Hawkins is demonstrating the technique by just thinking of the question. It looks like ESP, and maybe it's related, but he's really just testing the question against the bioelectrical field of the girl's body.
Okay, now I'm holding a painting in mind. Resist. That painting is over 500, 600, 700, 705.
And they go down.
She started to go down to 705. That's a Rembrandt.
Okay.
Rembrandt calibrates the highest of any artist as 700.
But what do I do if I have a question and nobody's around to help me? Well, there are a couple techniques you can do on your own, and I'm going to show you those. But Hawkins does recommend, if the question is fairly important, that you use the two-person technique. The first technique I'm going to show you when doing this on your own is what's called the O-ring finger technique, where you just take your hand and you connect your thumb to one of your fingers. I like to use my ring finger and to make an O. Then you take the thumb from your other hand, you're going to pull it through that O, the ring that you just created, the O. And then you make a statement, something like, the sun is hot, resist, or the sun is cold, resist. And you're just feeling the difference in how difficult it is to hold that O with your hand. It's fairly simple. The second technique is called the weight technique. You're really just grabbing a weight like a book, or in this case, like about a small dumbbell, and you're just going to lift it and notice a difference in your muscle strength from a positive answer to a negative answer, or true or false. For example, once again, we'll say, the sun is hot, resist. I'll say, the sun is cold, resist. And it's funny because I can actually feel the difference in my muscle very easily from one question to the other. The muscle test is obviously a breakthrough, but Hawkins really takes us to the next level with his map of consciousness, also known as the map of truth. A few years ago, I had a coworker who was an attorney who genuinely believed there was no such thing as absolute truth. He believed that truth was subjective, personal, or possibly decided by the person with the best argument. Clearly the position of attorney. And he's not alone. Many people believe that truth is subjective and flexible. And that's understandable, but I beg to differ. So let's just rebuild Hawkins' map of truth from scratch together. On this hand, imagine I've got shame. On this hand, I've got pride. Which one of these do you believe has more energy, power, and love? I would argue that pride is above shame, and I think most of you would agree with that. So we're going to put shame down here near the bottom, and we're going to take pride and put it about here in the middle somewhere. Next, we've got guilt and fear. Now, guilt is a fairly low energy, whereas fear will actually get you to jump out of the way of the moving bus, or maybe even make a major life change. So fear, I think, has more energy than guilt. So I'm going to put fear over here underneath pride, but guilt I'm going to put down here above shame, only because shame is very close to death and guilt is a little higher than that. All right, what about courage and love? Well, I'd be willing to bet that most of us agree that love has a lot more energy than just about all these. I'm going to put that up near the top of the chart. And courage, I'm going to put over here above pride. Why? Because in courage, the soldier will literally run into the bullets, whereas in pride, you'll run away. What about reason and willingness? Well, reason literally powers the modern world. It's logic, it's mathematics, it's computers, and it's very powerful. Willingness is about hopefulness and optimism. But I would argue that reason goes over here underneath love, but still fairly high and above courage. Whereas willingness definitely goes below reason, but above courage, just because it is so hopeful and optimistic. Now, just like that, we have rebuilt the bones of Hawkins' map from scratch in a way that I think most of you would agree with. This map proves that truth can be absolute. Why? Because even with just a brief exposure to this map, its truth becomes self-evident. And just like that, we have created a baseline on which we can measure truth against. Individually, a person may value fear more than love, but love absolutely has more power than fear. After Hawkins created this chart, he used muscle testing to determine a numerical value for every item on the chart from 1 to 1,000. And here are the numbers he came up with. Critically, he discovered that courage, which came in at 200, is the midpoint of the chart. Everything that is 200 and above is life-affirming and positive. Everything that is below 200 is life-denying and negative. Or you could just think true versus false. This chart allows us to move beyond simple yes or no answers. It allows us to attach a numerical value to the emotional energy of whatever we're testing. For example, the horror movie The Shining calibrates at 55, which is the level of despair, hopelessness, and apathy. Whereas the Christmas movie Miracle on 34th Street calibrates at 390, the level of harmony, willingness, and optimism. Emotions have enormous energy. So this chart is actually a logarithmic chart. meaning each number is 10 times more powerful than the number before it. If we were to write it out, then 1 would be 10, 2 would be 100, 3, 1,000, 4, 10,000, and so on until we have lots and lots of zeros. When we get to the top of the chart, we're looking at enormous energies, whereas at the bottom of the chart, there's almost no energy and eventually death. What about people? The truth is, everybody resonates with a specific number on this chart. Now, let me be clear. Everyone has likely felt every single emotion on this chart at some point in their lives. However, on a regular basis, we all hang out at a specific number, kind of like a home base, where we spend most of our life. However, it is possible to move up or down to a new home base for a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to muscle test yourself and get your precise level or exact number. However, you can read descriptions of the various levels and get an approximate idea of where you fall. And below, I've got a link to a detailed description of all of the levels. But I will summarize it briefly. In general, someone in the 200s to 300s makes the majority of their decisions based on emotion and feeling. Not that they don't understand logic, it just means that when it comes time to make a decision, they lean primarily on how it feels and their emotions. Someone in the 400s is much more likely to make the decisions based on logic and reason. Once again, not that they can't be emotional, but when it comes time to make a decision, they're much more likely to lean on their logic. Someone in the 500s is very likely to be a coach in something like, say, Alcoholics Anonymous, or someone who has devoted their life to spiritual work. This is also the level of the Catholic saints for the most part. This is the 500s level of love and joy. Worldwide, the majority of the population is 500 or below. In fact, unfortunately, most of the population is below 200. Whereas in the United States, about half the population is actually over 200. And throughout the entire population of the world, we only have about a dozen people at any given time who calibrate at 600 or above. The thing to understand is that your personal level is not like a letter grade. As long as you're over 200, and if you're watching this video, you probably are, then it really doesn't matter what your home base number actually is. It really just represents a preference or a way you prefer to be, say, being more emotional or being more logical or vice versa, not meaning that you couldn't do or use both. For people under 200, they are also using their emotions to make decisions, but in those cases, they are primarily negative. For example, people in federal prison are primarily calibrating at 65 or below. Overall, humanity was at 190 for centuries, and in 1987 popped over 200 for the first time in recorded human history, and today sits around 204. Now, 204 may not sound very high, but a population over 200, as you can remember, is 200 is life-affirming and positive, has a much brighter future than a population that is below 200, which is life-denying and negative. In fact, I'd be willing to argue that much of the chaos that we're seeing in the world today really is a remnant of shaking off of those old negative energies as we're now moving into a much more positive and life-affirming time. The reality is the future of humanity is really, really bright. If you'd like to have some fun, I would strongly recommend taking all of your movies, books, music, video games, etc., and test them to see which ones are above 200 and which ones are below 200, and put them into two piles. And I think the results will be very illuminating. If you'd like to see a few thousand examples of various muscle test results, I would strongly recommend Dr. Hawkins' book, Truth versus Falsehood, and there'll be a link in the description for that. If you want accurate results, there are a number of steps, limitations, and guidelines that you really should follow. However, for this moment, I don't want you to get too hung up on the details. I really would like you to just go out and test it, see how it works for you, and you really will get better with practice. Obviously, if you follow the following guidelines, your results will improve. First, you want to do what's called the thymus thump. The thymus thump was discovered by Dr. John Diamond as a way to clear your overall body's biological energy field. And all you really do is just you make a fist with your right or left hand, and you're going to take the padded or bottom side of your fist and put it and basically thump it against your thymus gland, which is located right at the base of your throat, underneath the top of your breastplate, your ribs. So you're just going to thump here while you smile and think of someone that you love. Looks like this. And it actually just clears out your bioelectric energy field, and actually you can kind of feel it. It's kind of cool. Second, it's important to think of yourself as a scientist. Your goal here is not to prove yourself right. Your goal is to get the correct answers. So oftentimes I like to think or imagine myself wearing a white lab coat like a scientist, and my goal is only to get the correct answer for what I'm testing, regardless if I'm wrong, because sometimes you're wrong. I'm not trying to prove a point. Third, you want to use, when we're testing the muscle with two people, we're really just using two fingers and we're pressing down with about 8 to 12 ounces of pressure, if you remember. We are testing the spring of the muscle. We are not testing the strength of the muscle. You're just trying to get a rough idea of is the muscle stronger or weaker. Fourth, it's important to get a baseline. A baseline, you want to ask some questions like, the sun is hot, resist. The sun is cold, resist. Or you could think of something like, think of Mother Teresa, resist. Or think of Saddam Hussein, resist. The whole point here is just trying to get an idea what it feels like when you get a positive answer or a negative answer before you start your actual questioning. Fifth, we need to ask permission. I know this sounds strange, but you don't always have permission to ask your questions. So in this case, you would say, I have permission to ask questions about X, resist. And assuming you get a positive answer, then you go ahead and ask questions. Sixth, you have to ask questions with integrity. For example, you cannot ask, what time do the guards get off at the bank so that I can rob the bank? Furthermore, you cannot use the O technique, for example, to cheat on tests, under the table at school. That just won't work. Seventh, you want to make statements, not questions. For example, you want to say, Harry Potter calibrates 200 or above, not does Harry Potter calibrate 200 or above. And those are the 7 steps that you want to follow. We're also going to cover the 5 guidelines limitations. Additionally, there are 5 guidelines and limitations that you need to be aware of if you want to get the best results. Number 1, both people doing any of the testing have to be at 200 or above personally to get accurate results. Number 2, you cannot be an atheist. I'm sorry, but if you don't believe in God or a higher power, you cannot do the test accurately, which was a genuine surprise to Hawkins, who at the time was working with a number of university professors who could not get accurate results. And he found out later that this group of people were all atheists. And upon future testing, discovered that if you're an atheist, you cannot get this test to work. And the implications of that little fact of not getting the test to work if you're an atheist are kind of profound if you think about it. Number 3, if you are married and in a committed relationship, there's a high probability that you may not be able to work with your committed partner to get accurate results with muscle testing and so forth. Hawkins assumed this had something to do with just the entanglement of married couples and others, energy fields, the high entanglement. Number 4, about 10% of the general population just cannot get accurate results for unknown reasons, but are assumed something to do probably with either hydration, possibly the medications that they're taking, or just genuine deep skepticism can also torpedo results. And number 5, it's important to remember once again that all questions have to be made as statements and can only be from the present into the distant past. You cannot ask about the future with this technique. However, if you are interested in the future, there is another technique called remote viewing, which I will be making a video on soon, which can be used to look into the future. And if you are watching this in the future, There may already be a link in the description. You are now ahead of all of the gods, Greek, Roman, and most of the historical heroes of the past and most of the superheroes of the present. Why? Because this simple test gives you the ability to tell the truth. And if you think about all of their adventures, the gods, the heroes, the superheroes, and so forth, most, if not all of their stories, have to do with them not being able to know what's true, what's really going on. And you have to spend all this energy to try and find out what's actually happening. You now have access to the truth. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Honestly, I believe it's one of the more important videos that I'll probably ever do. And in a world that seems to literally be going insane, this simple test can actually put, a measure of control back into your own hands. If you do try this test, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your experiences and success or failures or whatever. Please leave a comment. It'd be really great. Also, like and subscribe. I'm Disclosure Dad. Let's disclose some truth together.